But first, this is what the left wants you to believe that this case is about.
What is this a trial about, the way you see it?
Well, let me quote Donald Trump's Justice Department's prosecutors in public when they made the charge that Donald Trump, and they wrote this, directed Michael Cohen to pay this money to Ms. Daniels. They said this case is about the impairment of democracy by allowing wealthy people such as Mr. Trump to buy silence a few days before the election to prevent the American people from gaining information they need. They describe this case as about democracy. That's the Federal District of New York, Southern District of New York prosecutors in a public document, hiding in plain sight. So every time someone describes this in a disparaging way as about sex or something else, quote Donald Trump's prosecutors describing this case as seriously about the undermining of democracy.
Yeah, so that's longtime Trump deranged attorney Lanny Davis basically begging his partners in the corporate media to not make this about an alleged affair and begging them not to make this about a non-disclosure agreement, or like the propagandists like to call it, hush money. They want to make this about election interference. They want to make it about election integrity, which of course is completely insane. And no one will actually believe that. No one does believe it. But this is just the weapon the Manhattan District Attorney has used. You know, all this is just a trick. And they have to use this as a trick because here's the Trump case basically in a nutshell, right? Trump paid his lawyer money that his lawyer had previously claimed he paid on his own, out of his own account, with no direction from Donald Trump. And because it was money to the lawyer, the Trump organization ledgered it as legal expenses. Now, the state of New York says that's not correct. The state says it wasn't for actual legal services, so that makes Donald Trump guilty of falsifying business records. Not taxes, not shareholder information, nothing to the SEC or any other legal oversight organization, just his own personal business records. Now, obviously he's a master criminal, so in New York, that is actually a class 1 misdemeanor, which is less serious, by the way, than the average DUI. So how do you get from one unimportant misdemeanor to 34 pretty damn serious felonies, right? Well, like our TDS infected friend, Lanny Davis, said, this is all about election interference. The problem you would think that the state of New York would have is the fact that Michael Cohen pled guilty to these payments as an illegal campaign contribution. And the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, they looked all through every bit of this and decided that there is no election-related crimes for Donald Trump. And even if there were, the state of New York cannot prosecute you for an unindicted federal crime. So how do they get around that? Well, Alvin Bragg and Judge Juan Merchan say that Donald Trump doesn't have to be convicted, doesn't even have to be charged, doesn't even really have to be accused of some other election-related crime. He just has to have intended to commit another crime while paying Michael Cohen for his hush money help. So even simpler than that. Trump allegedly committed a misdemeanor by writing something down incorrectly in his own private company's private records. And that became a felony when the state said, but he's Donald Trump. He must have been committing some other crime. They don't even have to prove another crime existed. Just the fact that he had criminal thoughts makes everything that he does a crime. So, okay. Obviously, that's a stretch. That's a little rich, right? So how did they turn it into 34? Well, Michael Cohen was paid in 10 or 11 installments, right? So here's what they did. And this just tells you how dirty everything is. So every invoice that Cohen sent, every invoice that was recorded by Donald Trump or whoever recorded it for him in the records, and every corresponding check cut became its each separately charged serious felony. So one misdemeanor turned into 34 magical felonies. And I totally understand, you might be a brainwashed, no one is above the law leftist hearing all this, watching this and basically becoming sexually aroused, thinking about how they're doing this. But just ask yourself, man, would anyone else on the entire face of the earth be treated and charged this way, especially by DA Alvin Bragg, who just a day or so ago neglected to charge E. Jean Carroll with a serious gun felony. And a month or so ago, he let a group of violent cop beaters walk out the front door for free. right? This guy has essentially decriminalized anything a non-white person does in New York City, not even mentioning the special political actors helping him prosecute the case. I think it's pretty safe to say and pretty clear that only Donald Trump would be charged in this case. So, I don't know. What are Donald Trump's options, right? How can you win in New York City? Plenty of people think he can't. I actually think that he absolutely can, and I'm pretty confident that he actually will. But what are his options?
Well, they're not very surprising. These are fairly standard and predictable moves. The first one being that you have to destroy Michael Cohen's credibility, but there's not much there to destroy. I mean, this is the ultimate bottom feeder witness, where the question is whether the jury is going to recoil by the prosecutors putting him on the stand. He was just denounced by a judge for being a serial perjurer. And so it doesn't really help to say, well, that's so last week. I'm testifying in another case. He has this long litany of false statements, conflicts. You know, he pleaded guilty under oath and then later said that he wasn't telling the truth. To the astonishment of many of us, he was never prosecuted for that perjury by the Justice Department, and now he's appearing as a witness for a prosecution team. So this is just a very strange universe that we have entered in this case. The second issue involves a fairly standard motion that occurs when you believe that the jury may not agree that the big ticket item of a charge, the felonies, is proven. And you want the court to give an instruction saying you can always convict on lesser included offenses, in this case a misdemeanor. Now, sometimes the defense doesn't want to do that. Sometimes they just want to leave the jury with the cliff option, thinking that they don't want to go over the cliff, so they'll go ahead and acquit. But many times this works in favor of the defense. For Trump, there could be personal resistance to even suggesting a possible misdemeanor conviction. But politically and legally, it would be a very significant advantage for him.
Couple of things. Lanny Davis, the attorney for Michael Cohen, I don't know how he's paying him, says there's more than just Michael Cohen to testify against Trump. Do you know of anything about this?
Well, you know, I've been critical of this case since it was filed. This is the weaponization of the criminal justice system. This is a bizarre case. And in fact, that second strategy makes sense because this was always a misdemeanor under state law, but it's the statute of limitations had run. So what they did here is they bootstrapped a federal crime, and they're going to prosecute it essentially in state court. And now this is a crime that the Department of Justice rejected. They didn't believe that there could be a basis for charging under the federal election laws, at least not a credible one. So you have this really odd effort in order to sort of take a federal offense, rejuvenate a misdemeanor, and then convict him for a felony. And it's just, in my view, raw political manipulation of the criminal justice system.
And if convicted, he can get probation or he could get 4 years in jail. A lot has to do with the judge. And I don't know if
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that. Obviously, this is a very, very smart guy. And the left, you know, they lifted him up as a hero when he said there wasn't yet enough evidence to impeach Joe Biden. Something tells me they're not going to assign the same amount of weight to these words. But the guy is absolutely spot on. This is the weaponization of the justice system.